here's one of the guys who can tell you I'm okay, all right? Here, hold on. You want to call your mother or something?
You gotta get back to you.
I know that. You gotta
get back.
All right? Don't worry about me. You need to make calls right now. All right.
The 4-1 should have taken a couple of companies that they were leaving back to us that were stuck in the tunnel. So that, they might be busy doing.
Go against another. Hours after the attack, many smaller explosions rumbled through downtown.
At Ground Zero, running in the streets is the only form of escape. But on those same streets, the chaos and vibrations couldn't be avoided.
Keep your eye on that building as they coming down.
Building is about to blow up. Moving back.
Reported that 3 weeks after the collapse, live fires burned and molten metal still flowed underground.
You see how this debris is still smoking? That's from the fires that are still burning. 8 weeks later, we still got fires burning.
Steel-toed boots is one of the biggest things. Out, still on the rubble, it's still, I believe, 1,100 degrees. The guy's boots just melt within a few hours.
In November 2005, physics professor Stephen Jones of Brigham Young University published a 25-page treatise on the collapse of the Twin Towers and Building 7, applying the laws of physics to the official story. From an interview on MSNBC.
As we read in the FEMA report, it says here, and I put this in my paper, of course, the best hypothesis, which is the only one they looked at, the fire, has only a low probability of occurrence. Further investigation, analyses are needed to resolve this issue, and
Professor,
I agree with that.
I am sorry that we are out of time, and I'm not sure that you've
one other thing I want to mention about...
Okay, if you can hit it,
okay,
hit it quickly.
all right. Okay, here we go. Molten metal in the basements of all 3 buildings.
Right.
And yet all scientists now reasonably agree that the fires were not sufficiently hot to melt the steel. So what is this molten metal? It's a direct evidence for the use of high-temperature explosives such as thermite. Thermite produces molten iron as an end product.
Okay. We appreciate your coming on, even if I don't understand your theories. We appreciate you trying to explain them. Thanks.
Professor Jones barely got in his mention of thermite. An incendiary used by the military, thermite is a compound of iron oxide and aluminum, which when ignited sustains an extreme heat reaction, creating molten iron. In just 2 seconds, thermite can reach temperatures over 4,500 degrees Fahrenheit, quite enough to liquefy steel. This is thermite melting the engine of a car. We know that open-air fires cannot burn hot enough to melt steel, but metal had melted at the base of the towers. The second product of a thermite reaction is aluminum oxide, visible as white smoke. Was thermite used in conjunction with explosives on September 11th? Watch this very bright substance pouring from the 81st floor of the South Tower. And white smoke appeared at the base of the building. Would this be aluminum oxide, the byproduct of a thermite reaction? Appendix C of the FEMA report describes sulfur residues on the World Trade Center steel. The New York Times called this the deepest mystery of all. Sulfur slightly lowers the melting point of iron, and iron oxide and iron sulfide had formed on the surface of the structural steel. Sulfur used with thermite is called thermate, producing even faster results.
The Anglo-American Empire invaded Afghanistan because they had to secure the country so that oil pipelines could be run from the Caspian Sea basin down through Afghanistan and Pakistan to the Arabian Sea, thus neatly bypassing Iran. Negotiations were held with the Taliban, who incidentally had been funded and brought to power by the US via Pakistan's intelligence service, the ISI, which included at least 2 trips to the US by Taliban officials. When the Taliban failed to cooperate with the plans of the oil companies, invasion plans were drawn up, followed rather conveniently by the 9/11 attacks, thus justifying an invasion and occupation. Control of the Afghan drug trade was another reason for the war. The Taliban had to be removed from power as for religious reasons they'd massively reduced opium production shortly before 9/11, resulting in a major loss of revenue for multinational drug companies as well as funding for CIA covert operations, traditionally financed by drug money. Control of Afghanistan's natural resources has never been seen as a major reason for the war, as the country wasn't thought to possess huge amounts of oil or minerals. That's changed with the revelation, as reported in yesterday's New York Times, that the US has discovered nearly $1 trillion in untapped mineral deposits in Afghanistan, far beyond any previously known reserves. Except it wasn't really a new discovery, as we learn later in the article that huge mineral deposits had been identified by Soviet mining experts during the Soviet occupation of Afghanistan in the 1980s. Plans and charts which had then fallen into the hands of Afghan geologists. The war in Afghanistan, it's all about oil pipelines, opium and natural resources.
Madam Speaker, I have a few questions for my colleagues. What if our foreign policy of the past century is deeply flawed and has not served our national security interests? What if we wake up one day and realize that the terrorist threat is a predictable consequence of our meddling in the affairs of others and has nothing to do with us being free and prosperous? What if propping up repressive regimes in the Middle East endangers both the United States and Israel? What if occupying countries like Iraq and Afghanistan and bombing Pakistan is directly related to the hatred directed toward us? What if someday it dawns on us that losing over 5,000 American military personnel in the Middle East since 9/11 is not a fair trade-off for the loss of nearly 3,000 American citizens, no matter how many Iraqi, Pakistani, and Afghan people are killed or displaced? What if we finally decide that torture, even if called enhanced interrogation technique, is self-destructive and produces no useful information, and that contracting it out to a third world nation is just as evil? What if it is finally realized that war and military spending is always destructive to the economy? What if all wartime spending is paid for through the deceitful and evil process of inflating and borrowing? What if we finally see that wartime conditions always undermine personal liberty? What if conservatives who preach small government wake up and realize that our interventionist foreign policy provides the greatest incentive to expand the government? What if conservatives understood once again that their only logical position, military intervention and managing an empire throughout the world? What if the American people woke up and understood that the official reasons for going to war are almost always based on lies and promoted by war propaganda in order to serve special interests? What if we as a nation came to realize that the quest for empire eventually destroys all great nations? What if Obama has no intention of leaving Iraq? What if a military draft is being planned for the wars that will spread if our foreign policy is not changed? What if the American people learn the truth? That our foreign policy has nothing to do with national security, that it never changes from one administration to the next? What if war and preparation for war is a racket serving the special interests? What if President Obama is completely wrong about Afghanistan and turns out worse than Iraq and Vietnam put together? What if Christianity actually teaches peace and not preventive wars of aggression? What if diplomacy is found to be superior to bombs and bribes in protecting America? What happens if my concerns are completely unfounded? Nothing. But what happens if my concerns are justified and ignored? Nothing good. And I yield back the balance of my time.
On at least one occasion, Eisenhower was heard to say by those in the room, "God help this country when somebody sits at this desk who doesn't know as much about the military as I do."
My fellow Americans, this evening I come to you with a message of leave-taking and farewell, and to share a few final thoughts with you, my countrymen. We have been compelled to create a permanent armaments industry of vast proportions. 3.5 million men and women are directly engaged in the defense establishment. The total influence, economic, political, even spiritual, is felt in every city, every state house, every office of the federal government. We recognize the imperative need for this development. Yet we must not fail to comprehend its grave implications. In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex. The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist. We must never let the weight of this combination endanger our liberties or democratic processes.